The VIP lounge at the international airport felt like a small world of silence and comfort, far away from the noise and stress outside. Soft music played in the background, almost too quiet to notice, and the smell of fresh coffee floated gently through the air. Large glass walls showed planes moving slowly on the runway, their lights blinking like distant stars. Rich travelers sat in wide leather chairs, some reading newspapers, others scrolling on their phones, and a few talking in low voices as if afraid to disturb the peace. Everything in the lounge spoke of status and privilege. Into this calm space walked a black woman named Ava. She did not rush. Her steps were steady and confident, as if she belonged there without question. She wore a simple but elegant suit, perfectly fitted, with clean shoes and a small leather bag over her shoulder. Her hair was neatly styled, and her face showed calm focus, not pride, not fear. She scanned the room briefly, then walked toward an empty seat near the window. Some people noticed her, but most did not care at first. She looked like someone who knew where she was going. As Ava placed her bag down and reached for her boarding pass, a senior pilot standing near the lounge desk suddenly stiffened. He had silver hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of posture that demanded attention. His uniform was crisp, decorated with stripes that showed years of flying and authority. He had been laughing with another crew member, but the moment he saw Ava, his smile faded. His eyes moved slowly over her clothes, then paused on her face, and his expression changed to a deep frown. Something about her presence bothered him, though he could not say why. He whispered something to the crew member, then stepped forward. The sound of his polished shoes against the floor seemed louder than it should have been. Ava noticed him approaching but did not react. She calmly adjusted her seat and looked toward the window again. The pilot stopped a short distance from her and cleared his throat loudly. Several people nearby looked up. In a voice that carried across the lounge, sharp and cold, he said she must be in the wrong place. His tone was not a question. It was an order. He told her this lounge was only for VIP guests and airline executives. The room seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped in the middle of sentences. A spoon paused halfway to a cup. Eyes slowly turned toward Ava. Some faces showed surprise, others curiosity, and a few quiet smiles, as if they were enjoying an unexpected show. Ava turned her head slowly and looked up at the pilot. Her face remained calm, her eyes steady. She did not look angry or scared. She simply listened. The pilot went on louder now, saying she should leave before security had to be called. He pointed toward the door as if she were a child who had wandered into the wrong classroom. A heavy silence settled in the lounge. Ava stood up slowly, not in panic but with control. She was slightly shorter than the pilot, but her posture was straight, her shoulders relaxed. She thanked him for his concern in a polite voice and said she believed there was a mistake. Her calm response seemed to irritate him even more. He laughed shortly, a sound without humor, and said mistakes like this happened when people tried to enter places they did not belong. His words cut through the air like glass. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but no one spoke. Ava took a deep breath and reached into her bag. She held her boarding pass and lounge access card in her hand, but did not push them forward yet. Instead, she looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the silent witnesses. Some quickly looked away. Others stared back, unsure what to think. The tension grew thicker with every second. The pilot crossed his arms, clearly enjoying his control over the moment. He was certain he was right. He had spent his life being obeyed, being respected, and being feared. To him, this was just another moment to show power. Ava finally spoke again, her voice still steady, asking him calmly to lower his voice and check the information properly. Her simple request felt like a challenge to him. His face hardened, and he raised his voice even more, saying he did not need to check anything because he could tell who belonged in the VIP lounge and who did not. A quiet gasp moved through the room. The air felt tight, as if everyone was holding their breath. Ava did not argue. She did not explain herself. She simply stood there, calm and silent, while the pilot's words echoed around the lounge. That silence made the moment more powerful than any shouting could. Some passengers began to feel uneasy, sensing that something was wrong, that this situation was not as simple as the pilot believed. The calm luxury of the lounge now felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Ava's calm presence stood in sharp contrast to the pilot's loud authority. She looked at him one last time and said softly that respect should come before judgment. Her words were quiet, but they landed heavily. The pilot scoffed, waving his hand as if brushing her aside, and said she would need to leave immediately. As he turned slightly toward the desk to call security, Ava remained standing, unshaken, her eyes following him with quiet confidence. No one knew it yet, but this moment, which began as a cold welcome, was the first crack in the pilot's world, and the first sign that the calm silence of the VIP lounge was about to turn into something none of them would ever forget. The pilot's hand hovered near the lounge desk phone as if he enjoyed making Ava wait, enjoying the power he believed he held over her. He glanced back at her with a small, proud smile, certain that everyone in the room was on his side. Ava, however, did not move toward the exit. She stood quietly beside her chair, holding her boarding pass in one hand, her bag resting neatly by her feet. Her calm made the situation feel strange, almost uncomfortable. The pilot turned fully toward her again and asked, louder this time, why she was still standing there. He repeated that she did not belong in the VIP lounge and said she was wasting everyone's time. A few people nearby shifted in their seats, pretending to look at their phones, but their ears were clearly tuned to every word. One man cleared his throat as if he wanted to speak, and thought better of it. A woman across the room frowned, her lips pressed tightly together. Ava finally raised her boarding pass slightly, not pushing it forward, but holding it where it could be seen. She said calmly that she had valid access and asked him to please check. The pilot barely glanced at the card. He laughed again, shaking his head, and said anyone could print a fake pass these days. His voice carried a sharp edge, and the room felt smaller with every second. Ava's fingers tightened slightly around the card, but her face remained steady. She asked once more politely for him to verify the information through the system. This simple request seemed to insult him deeply. His face flushed, and he straightened his uniform as if reminding everyone who he was. He said he did not need to prove anything to her, and that his experience told him everything he needed to know. A low murmur spread through the lounge. People were no longer relaxed. The soft music felt out of place now, almost mocking the tension in the air. Ava took a slow breath and said she did not want trouble, only fairness. Her words were calm, but they carried strength. The pilot pointed toward the door again and said security would remove her if she did not leave on her own. At that moment, a young lounge attendant stepped closer, her face nervous. She quietly suggested checking the system, just to be sure. The pilot shot her a sharp look, silencing her instantly. He told her to mind her duties and stepped closer to Ava, lowering his voice but keeping it firm. He said she was embarrassing herself and should leave with dignity. Ava looked at him, truly looked at him, as if trying to understand how someone could be so sure without knowing the truth. She replied that dignity came from how people treated others, not from uniforms or titles. Her words caused a ripple of quiet reactions around the room. A man near the window nodded slightly. Another woman folded her arms, clearly uncomfortable with the pilot's behavior. Still, no one openly challenged him. The pilot's confidence began to mix with irritation. He had expected tears, anger, or fear, not calm strength. He turned back toward the desk and picked up the phone, announcing loudly that security would be called to handle the situation. Ava did not stop him. She did not argue. She simply stood there, waiting. That waiting felt heavy, as if time itself had slowed. The pilot spoke into the phone, describing a woman who refused to leave the VIP lounge. His words were careful but cold. When he hung up, he crossed his arms again and looked around, as if inviting the audience to enjoy the final moments of her removal. Ava shifted her weight slightly, but did not step back. She looked around the room once more, her eyes calm, her expression thoughtful. She seemed less like someone in trouble and more like someone observing a test. The sound of footsteps approached from the hallway, and the pilot smiled in satisfaction. The lounge, once a place of quiet comfort, now felt charged with emotion. People held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Ava closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, standing tall and composed. Whatever came next, she was ready. The public humiliation was far from over, but beneath the surface, something else was building. Something the pilot could not see. Something that would soon turn this moment upside down. Ava remained standing as the echo of the pilot's voice faded into the quiet air of the VIP lounge. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, then slowed, as if even the hallway outside felt the tension pressing through the glass walls. People shifted again in their seats, some pretending to read, others openly watching now. The calm luxury of the room had fully vanished, replaced by a heavy feeling that settled in everyone's chest. Ava's silence was not empty. It was full of control, full of thought. She knew that reacting with anger would only give the pilot what he wanted. Instead, she held her calm like a shield. The pilot watched her closely, expecting her to break, to argue, to plead, but she did none of those things. This only made him more uncomfortable, though he did not show it. He cleared his throat and said again that she could still leave on her own before security arrived. His voice was lower now, less confident than before, but still firm. Ava looked at him with steady eyes and asked a single question, spoken clearly but softly. She asked if he had followed proper procedure before making his judgment. The question seemed to catch him off guard. He frowned and asked what she meant. Ava explained that every VIP lounge access issue had a clear process and that skipping steps often caused problems. Her tone was respectful, not challenging, but it carried quiet authority. A few heads in the lounge lifted higher, listening closely. The pilot responded quickly, saying procedures existed for normal situations, not obvious mistakes. His words sounded rehearsed, as if he was convincing himself as much as others. Ava nodded slowly, as if accepting his answer, then said that obvious mistakes often looked obvious only to those who refused to look deeper. The pilot laughed sharply, but the sound lacked confidence. He told her she was speaking above her position and warned her not to lecture him. Ava did not reply right away. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook, worn at the edges, and held it in her hand. She did not open it. She simply held it, as if reminding herself of something important. The pilot noticed the movement and frowned again, suspicious. He asked what she was doing. Ava said calmly that she was waiting. Waiting for security, waiting for truth, waiting for fairness. The word fairness seemed to hang in the air. The lounge attendant from earlier stood near the desk, clearly uncomfortable. She kept glancing between Ava and the pilot, her fingers twisting together. Ava noticed her nervousness and gave her a small, reassuring smile. That simple gesture felt out of place in the tense room, yet it softened the atmosphere for a brief moment. The pilot saw the exchange and felt his control slipping. He raised his voice again, telling Ava to stop making a scene. Ava replied that she had not raised her voice once. Her calm statement caused a quiet stir. A man seated near the window nodded slowly, as if agreeing with her. Another traveler sighed and closed their magazine, now fully invested in what was happening. The pilot's jaw tightened. He took a step closer, invading Ava's personal space, clearly trying to intimidate her. Ava did not step back. She stood her ground, her posture relaxed but firm. She asked him, very politely, to step back and respect her space. The request, delivered without fear, unsettled him. He hesitated for a second, then stepped back half a step, pretending it was his choice. The sound of footsteps returned, closer now. Security was near. The pilot straightened his uniform again, preparing himself, ready to present his version of events. Ava watched him quietly, studying his movements, his expressions, the small signs of someone protecting a fragile sense of power. She wondered how many times he had done this before, how many people had been silenced by his confidence. She wondered how many had walked away without a voice. Her expression did not change, but her thoughts were clear. She would not be one of them. Security finally appeared at the entrance of the lounge. 2 officers in dark uniforms. The room felt smaller as all eyes turned toward them. The pilot immediately stepped forward, speaking quickly and confidently, explaining that a woman without proper access refused to leave. He gestured toward Ava as if presenting evidence. The officers looked at Ava next. She met their eyes calmly and greeted them politely. Her voice was steady as she explained that there seemed to be a misunderstanding and that she had asked for proper verification. One officer nodded, listening carefully, while the other glanced at the pilot. Ava then asked a simple but powerful question. She asked if they would mind checking her access through the system before taking any action. The officers exchanged a brief look. One of them said that was standard procedure and asked for her boarding pass and access card. Ava handed them over without hesitation. The pilot opened his mouth to object, but the officer raised a hand gently, asking him to wait. That moment marked a small but important shift. The pilot was no longer in full control. As the officer walked toward the desk to check the system, the lounge fell into deep silence. The sound of typing on a keyboard felt loud, almost dramatic. Ava stood still, her heart steady. She knew the truth was on her side. The pilot, however, began to feel a quiet unease. He crossed his arms again, but this time it looked less like confidence and more like defense. He avoided looking directly at Ava, instead staring at the desk, waiting for confirmation that he was right. The seconds stretched. Each one felt heavier than the last. The officer frowned slightly at the screen, then typed again. The pilot shifted his weight. Ava watched calmly, her expression unchanged. Whatever the system revealed, the moment of blind judgment had already been exposed. Even if the truth was not fully visible yet, the room had begun to see something deeper. Respect, silence, and strength had spoken louder than any insult. And as the officer continued to check the details, the balance of power in the VIP lounge quietly began to change, setting the stage for a revelation that would soon shake everyone present. As the security officer continued to study the screen, the pilot's thoughts drifted backward, away from the VIP lounge and into the long road that had brought him there. His name was Captain Richard Hawley, a name that carried weight in airline circles. For years, that name had opened doors, earned nods of respect, and silenced questions before they were even asked. He had spent most of his life in cockpits, command rooms, and executive offices, always in control, always obeyed. He believed strongly in order and hierarchy. To him, the world worked best when everyone stayed in their proper place. That belief had shaped his career and his character. Richard grew up watching his father, a strict man who believed authority was never to be challenged. From a young age, Richard learned that power came from confidence, from speaking loudly, and from never showing doubt. He carried those lessons into flight school, where discipline was everything. He learned quickly, performed well, and rose faster than many of his peers. Instructors praised his skill, though some quietly noted his lack of patience with those he saw as weaker or slower. Still, results mattered more than personality, and Richard delivered results. As years passed, his confidence hardened into certainty. He flew thousands of hours, earned medals, and wore his uniform like armor. Passengers trusted him without question. Younger pilots looked up to him. Managers relied on him. No one told him no anymore. In his mind, respect was something he owned, not something he had to give. That sense of ownership followed him everywhere, including into the VIP lounge. Standing there now, waiting for security to confirm his judgment, Richard felt the familiar certainty rise again. He told himself this situation was simple. A woman had walked into a space reserved for people like him, and he had corrected the mistake. That was his role. That was his duty. He did not see his words as cruel. He saw them as efficient. In his mind, kindness often led to chaos. Order required firmness. Yet beneath that confidence, a small crack had begun to form. It started the moment Ava did not react as expected. He had seen fear many times before. He had seen anger too. But her calm unsettled him. It did not fit his understanding of how power worked. Still, he pushed that thought away. He reminded himself of his rank, his experience, his authority. He straightened his shoulders and lifted his chin slightly, as if physically holding his world together. He glanced around the lounge, noticing the way people watched him now, not with admiration, but with curiosity. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He wanted their silent agreement, their unspoken support. Instead, he sensed doubt. That doubt felt like a challenge. Richard's mind returned to other moments in his past, times when he had made quick judgments and been praised for decisiveness. He remembered a junior crew member who once questioned him during a flight. Richard had shut him down immediately, and later management praised his leadership. That moment became proof, in Richard's mind, that authority should never hesitate. Hesitation, he believed, was weakness. That belief now pushed him forward. He convinced himself that the officers checking the system would soon confirm his view, and everyone would see that he was right. He imagined Ava Binge escorted out, the lounge returning to normal, his control restored. Yet, as he watched the officer's face grow more serious while reading the screen, that image began to blur. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. He dismissed it as irritation. He told himself the system was slow, that technical issues happened all the time. Still, his foot tapped lightly against the floor, a small sign of tension he did not notice. His thoughts shifted again, this time toward how others saw him. Reputation mattered deeply to him. He had built it carefully over decades. The idea that this moment could damage it felt impossible, almost insulting. He believed his uniform protected him, that it acted like proof of character. People trusted uniforms. People respected titles. That was how the world worked, or so he believed. He looked at Ava again, standing calmly, her face composed, her eyes focused. She did not look like someone waiting to be rescued. She looked like someone waiting for a process to finish. That image disturbed him. It suggested a balance he did not control. Richard pushed the feeling down and reminded himself that she was alone and he was not. He had security, staff, and status on his side. The past had taught him that numbers mattered. Yet something else from his past surfaced, a memory he had buried long ago. It was a moment early in his career when a senior captain had humiliated him in front of a crew. Richard had felt small, powerless, and angry. He had promised himself that he would never feel that way again. Over time, that promise twisted into something darker. Instead of preventing humiliation, he learned to deliver it. Standing in the lounge now, he unknowingly stood on the same path that had once hurt him. He did not see the irony. He only felt the need to win. The officer at the desk typed again, his eyes narrowing slightly. Richard's heart beat faster. He took a step forward, then stopped himself, forcing a calm expression. He reminded himself that he was Captain Richard Hawley, that he commanded aircraft and lives, that no simple check could threaten him. Yet the silence felt loud. Each second stretched, pulling at his certainty. The lounge no longer felt like his territory. It felt like a courtroom waiting for a verdict. Richard swallowed, his confidence now mixed with something unfamiliar. It was not fear, not yet, but the uncomfortable sense that the ground beneath him was not as solid as he believed. And as the officer prepared to speak, Richard stood at the edge of a truth he had never faced before. A truth that would test everything he thought he knew about power, respect, and himself. The silence in the VIP lounge grew so deep that even the soft hum of the air system sounded loud. Every eye was fixed on the security officer standing at the desk, his fingers resting on the keyboard. Captain Richard Hawley stood a few steps behind him, arms crossed, his face carefully controlled, though the tension in his body was clear now. Ava stood on the other side, calm and steady, her hands relaxed at her sides. She looked neither proud nor nervous. She looked patient, as if she had waited for moments like this before. The officer cleared his throat softly and leaned closer to the screen, reading again, slower this time. His expression changed, not suddenly, but clearly. His eyebrows lifted slightly, and his posture straightened. He typed a few more keys, then stopped. The second officer noticed the change and stepped closer, looking at the screen as well. Their eyes met briefly, and in that quiet exchange, something important passed between them. Captain Holland noticed it too. His stomach tightened. He asked sharply if there was a problem. The officer did not answer him right away. Instead, he turned fully toward Ava and spoke to her respectfully, asking her to confirm her name. Ava nodded and said her full name clearly. The officer repeated it slowly, then looked back at the screen. Captain Hale's confidence wavered. He asked again, louder now, what was going on. The officer finally turned toward him, his tone calm but firm, and asked him to wait. That single sentence landed like a blow. Captain Hawley was not used to being told to wait, especially not in public, and especially not by security staff. A low murmur moved through the lounge. People leaned forward in their seats. Phones were quietly lowered. No one wanted to miss what came next. The officer straightened and addressed Ava again, this time with visible respect. He asked if she was traveling on official business. Ava answered calmly that she was attending a scheduled aviation review meeting later that day. The officer nodded, as if that confirmed something he already suspected. He then turned toward the lounge attendant and quietly asked her to contact airport management immediately and inform them that a senior aviation official was present in the VIP lounge. The attendant's eyes widened. She nodded quickly and moved away. Captain Hawley felt heat rise to his face. He laughed once, short and forced, and said this was getting ridiculous. He said anyone could claim to be important and that security was wasting time. His voice, however, no longer carried the same strength. It sounded strained, almost defensive. Ava finally spoke again, her voice gentle but clear. She said there was no need for raised voices and that the truth would speak for itself. Her calm words made the room feel even quieter. Moments later, footsteps approached again, faster this time. A group entered the lounge, led by a senior airport manager and an older man in a dark suit. The moment the manager saw Ava, he stopped. His face changed instantly. He walked toward her with urgency and respect, greeting her by name. He apologized for the disturbance and welcomed her warmly. The entire lounge seemed to inhale at once. Captain Hawley froze. His arms dropped slowly to his sides. The confident posture he had held so carefully collapsed in a single moment. He stared at the scene in front of him, his mind struggling to understand what he was seeing. The manager turned to the man in the suit and introduced Ava formally, stating her full title and role within the National Aviation Authority. He explained that she was a key decision-maker involved in pilot evaluations, safety compliance, and airline oversight. Each word hit Captain Hawley harder than the last. His face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The room erupted into whispers. Some people covered their mouths in shock. Others stared openly at the pilot, their earlier silence now filled with understanding. Ava stood quietly, accepting the greeting with a polite nod. She did not smile. She did not look at Captain Hawley right away. When she finally did, her expression was calm, almost sad. There was no anger in her eyes, only clarity. Captain Hawley took a step back without realizing it. His legs felt weak. The uniform that had once made him feel powerful now felt heavy, like a costume he could no longer hide behind. The senior manager turned toward him, his expression serious. He asked Captain Hawley to explain what had happened. For the first time in his career, Captain Hawley had no words ready. He stammered, tried to speak, then stopped. Every excuse sounded empty in his head. The truth was too clear. Ava spoke before he could gather himself. She explained the situation simply, without emotion, without exaggeration. She described the words that were used, the refusal to verify access, and the public nature of the humiliation. Her voice remained steady throughout. She did not accuse. She did not insult. She only stated facts. The manager listened closely, his jaw tightening with each sentence. When Ava finished, the manager nodded slowly. He turned to Captain Hawley and said this matter would be formally reviewed. He informed him that his behavior raised serious concerns about judgment and professionalism. Captain Hawley felt as if the floor beneath him had disappeared. The world he trusted, built on authority and assumption, had turned against him in minutes. The lounge no longer looked at him with respect. It looked at him with quiet judgment. Ava thanked the manager and the officers for handling the situation and said she did not wish to cause further disruption. Her words surprised some people. They had expected anger or punishment. Instead, she chose dignity. The manager insisted on escorting her personally and offered a formal apology on behalf of the airport. As Ava gathered her bag, the room parted slightly, making space for her. People who had earlier avoided her gaze now watched her with admiration and regret. Captain Hawley remained standing, alone in the center of the lounge, the weight of his actions pressing down on him. As Ava walked away, she paused briefly and looked back at him. She did not say anything. She did not need to. The silence said enough. In that moment, Captain Hawley understood something he had ignored his entire life. Power without respect was fragile. Authority without fairness was empty. And the woman he had judged in seconds had just revealed a truth that would follow him far beyond the walls of the VIP lounge. The VIP lounge no longer felt like a place of comfort. The soft chairs, the quiet music, and the polished floors now seemed distant, almost unreal. All attention had shifted to Captain Richard Hawley, who stood frozen where he was, his thoughts tangled and his confidence broken. The senior airport manager's words echoed in his ears, each one heavy with meaning. A formal review. Serious concerns. Professional behavior. These were not small warnings. These were words that could change a career. For the first time in many years, Richard felt truly exposed. The uniform he wore no longer felt like protection. It felt like a spotlight He could sense the eyes of the people around him, no longer filled with admiration, but with judgment and disappointment. Some passengers whispered softly. Others stared openly. The authority he once carried so easily had slipped away, replaced by silence. The manager asked Richard to step aside so the situation could be documented properly. His voice was firm but controlled. Richard obeyed without protest. That alone shocked him. Obedience had never come easily to him, yet now it felt unavoidable. As he moved toward the side of the lounge, he noticed the security officers speaking quietly to each other, taking notes, reviewing camera footage on a small screen. Every action felt slow and heavy, as if time itself wanted him to feel each second. Ava, meanwhile, had been guided to a quiet seating area near the window. The manager offered her water and apologized again for what had happened. Ava thanked him politely and declined the water, saying she was fine. She sat calmly, her posture relaxed, her face thoughtful. She looked out at the runway, watching planes move in the distance. Despite everything that had just happened, she did not look angry or proud. She looked reflective. The manager explained that a full report would be filed and that Captain Hale would be temporarily removed from duty until the review was complete. Ava listened carefully, then surprised him by asking that the process be fair and complete, not rushed. She said accountability mattered, but so did learning. Her words carried weight. The manager nodded, clearly impressed by her composure. He assured her the matter would be handled properly. As the officers continued their work, one of them approached Captain Hale and asked him to confirm his statement on record. Richard felt his throat tighten. He nodded and spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully, though none of them felt right. He explained his actions, but each sentence sounded hollow even to him. When asked why he refused to verify Ava's access, he hesitated. There was no good answer. He mumbled something about instinct and experience. The officer wrote it down without comment. That silence was worse than any argument. Richard glanced toward Ava, hoping for something, forgiveness maybe, or understanding. Instead, he saw her calm profile reflected in the glass. She did not look at him. That hurt more than anger would have. It forced him to sit with his own thoughts. He began to replay the moment in his mind, the loud words, the pointing finger, the assumptions. For the first time, he saw himself not as a leader, but as a bully. The realization settled heavily in his chest. Across the lounge, the atmosphere slowly shifted again. The tension did not disappear, but it changed shape. It became quieter, more thoughtful. People whispered less and observed more. Some passengers shook their heads softly. Others sighed, as if disappointed by what they had witnessed. The lounge attendant who had earlier been silenced by Richard now stood near the desk, watching him with a mix of fear and relief. She realized that authority could be questioned, but silence was not the only option. That realization stayed with her. The manager returned to Richard and informed him that he would need to leave the lounge and report to the airline's operations office immediately. Richard nodded again, his movements slow and heavy. As he walked toward the exit, the path seemed longer than before. Every step felt like a reminder of what he had lost. No one spoke to him. No one stopped him. The quiet followed him like a shadow. Before leaving, Richard paused and looked back once more. Ava was still seated, calm and composed. For a moment, he considered saying something, an apology perhaps. But the words did not come. He realized that apologies meant little without change. With that thought, he turned and left the lounge. After Richard's departure, the manager addressed the remaining passengers briefly, apologizing for the disturbance and thanking them for their patience. Slowly, the lounge began to return to its normal rhythm. Conversations resumed, though quieter than before. The music felt softer, more fitting now. Ava remained seated for a few more minutes, gathering her thoughts. The manager returned and informed her that her flight boarding would begin soon and that she would be personally escorted if she wished. Ava thanked him but said it was not necessary. She preferred to walk like everyone else. The manager respected her choice. As Ava stood and picked up her bag, a woman nearby caught her eye. The woman smiled softly and nodded, a silent gesture of respect. Ava returned the nod. Another passenger murmured a quiet thank you as she passed. These small moments mattered. They reminded Ava why she did the work she did. It was not about power. It was about people. As Ava walked out of the VIP lounge, the glass doors closing behind her, she felt a sense of quiet resolution. The situation had been painful, but it had also revealed truth. It had shown how easily judgment could harm, and how calm strength could challenge it. She knew the review process would continue, that reports would be filed, and decisions would be made. But she also knew that something deeper had already changed. For Richard, the consequences were just beginning. For the witnesses, a lesson had been learned. And for Ava, the moment reinforced her belief that dignity did not need to shout. It only needed to stand firm. The airport buzzed with life outside the lounge, unaware of the small but powerful shift that had taken place inside. Planes continued to take off and land, carrying stories, hopes, and futures. Among them was Ava, walking calmly toward her gate, carrying with her not anger, but clarity. And somewhere behind her, a man faced the weight of his choices, learning too late that respect is earned not by rank, but by how one treats others. As Ava walked through the airport terminal, the sounds of rolling suitcases and distant announcements surrounded her, slowly pulling her back into the normal rhythm of travel. The bright lights reflected off the polished floors, and people moved in every direction, each carrying their own stories and worries. To anyone watching, she looked like any other traveler heading toward her gate. No one would guess what had just happened in the VIP lounge. Ava welcomed that feeling. She did not want attention. She did not want praise. What mattered to her was that the truth had been seen. She reached her gate and took a seat near the window, placing her bag beside her. Outside, a plane prepared for departure, its engines humming softly. She watched it for a moment and allowed herself to breathe deeply. The tension she had held quietly inside her finally began to fade. A few minutes later, an airport staff member approached her politely and confirmed her boarding time. Ava thanked her and returned to her thoughts. She reflected on the moment in the lounge, not with anger, but with understanding. She knew that people like Captain Hawley did not wake up one day and choose to act that way. They were shaped by systems that rewarded confidence without compassion and power without reflection. That did not excuse his behavior, but it explained it. Ava believed that real change came not only from punishment, but from awareness. If even one person who witnessed the incident walked away thinking differently, then the moment had meaning. Meanwhile, in a quiet office away from the lounge, Captain Richard Hawley sat alone. The walls were plain, the chair uncomfortable. He no longer felt like the center of attention. He felt small. The review process had already begun. Forms were being filled. Reports were being written. His phone buzzed with missed calls from colleagues and supervisors, but he did not answer. For the first time in his career, he did not know what to say. He replayed the scene again and again in his mind, each time noticing details he had ignored before. Ava's calm voice, the way she never raised her tone, the way the room had slowly turned against him, not because of her power, but because of his behavior. He realized that the authority he valued so deeply had blinded him. He had mistaken control for respect. Sitting there now, stripped of certainty, he faced a truth he could not avoid. Change would be painful, but it was necessary. Back at the gate, Boarding was announced. Ava stood and joined the line, blending in with the other passengers. As she handed her boarding pass to the agent, the woman smiled warmly and wished her a pleasant flight. Ava returned the smile and walked down the jet bridge. The familiar narrow space felt grounding. She took her seat, placed her bag under the chair, and fastened her seatbelt. As the plane filled, she looked around at the passengers, each one different, each one human. She wondered how many stories of quiet strength went unnoticed every day. How many people were judged before being understood. The thought strengthened her resolve. Her work mattered because moments like this mattered. The plane began to move, slowly pulling away from the gate. Ava felt the gentle vibration beneath her feet. As the aircraft turned toward the runway, she closed her eyes briefly, letting the sound of the engine steady her thoughts. When the plane finally lifted into the air, she felt a sense of release. Not just from the ground, but from the weight of the moment she had carried. She looked out the window as the city grew smaller below. Somewhere down there, conversations were happening, lessons were settling in, and consequences were unfolding. Life moved forward. Days later, the story of the incident quietly made its way through airline offices and training rooms. It was not shared as gossip, but as a lesson. New discussions began about professionalism, bias, and respect. Some resisted at first, uncomfortable with the reflection. Others listened closely. Change did not happen overnight, but a seed had been planted. Captain Holly entered mandatory training and counseling as part of the review outcome. His future was uncertain, but his perspective had shifted.